Welcome friends, welcome to Virtually, because virtually is the key. We begin our journey with the book Flamingo, and the very first chapter is the last lesson. Strange, isn't it? The first chapter is the last lesson. Well, this chapter, this story has been authored by Alphonse Daudet. Alphonse Daudet is a French novelist and a short story writer. To know more about the story, it had been plotted during the Franco-Prussian War. Now, during the Franco-Prussian War, France had got defeated. France was defeated by Prussia, which was led by Bismarck. Now, it so happened because they took over, they wanted to make sure that in schools they teach German and not French. Now, that was a problem because they were the rulers then. And so this story is all about it. When we talk of the first thing, this story is a narrative story and it has been written, said by Franz. Now, Franz is a boy who is narrating this story, right? So now, he was late for school that morning. He was late, why? And he was very tensed, बहुत stress में था वो, क्यों? Because his teacher was going to take a test on participles. और उसे participles का P भी नहीं आता था. He was like, मैं school जाऊं क्यों? Why should I go? Look at the sun, it's so bright and morning. It's a nice sunny weather. It's so beautiful. The birds are chirping on the woods, on the edge of the woods. The Prussian soldiers are drilling. इतना सुहाना मौसम है, मैं school जाऊं क्यों? And that also for the test. Oh no, I don't want to. But you know what? He was a good boy. उस दिन he was like, okay, I am good यार, ठीक है, school जाते हैं. Let's go for it. Every time तो bunk नहीं मार सकते ना. So that day he was a good one, and he was tempted to break the rules, but then he said, okay, let me go. He resisted and he hurried to school. वो दौड़ के गया school, and the moment he passed the town hall. Now वहाँ से जब वो पास हुआ तो वहाँ पे उसे एक bulletin board नजर आया. Now, bulletin board एक ऐसा बोर्ड था जहाँ पे since the last 2 years सिर्फ और सिर्फ there was bad news, and he was like, oh my God, वहाँ पे तो गर्दी है. I wonder what next? क्या हो सकता है वहाँ पे? Again another bad news? But he did not stop. वो वहाँ रुका नहीं. He said, forget it, let me head to school. मुझे school जाना है. So he let go and he moved further. But जैसे ही वो आगे गया, he came across a blacksmith watcher. Blacksmith was there with his apprentice. What do we mean by the word apprentice? Apprentice is a trainee. The blacksmith watcher was training this person. So they were both together. And he had read the bulletin and he told me, don't go so fast. You'll get to your school in plenty of time. बहुत time है दोस्त, आराम से school जाओ. But his mind was, towards the school, so he didn't mind. उसे ये लगा कि the blacksmith is making fun of me. But who cares? Just let it be. मुझे तो school जाना है. Just let me rush to school. And he reached Mr. Hamel's garden. Mr. Hamel, can you see the M Hamel? Now M Hamel means, now in French, M stands for Monsieur. Monsieur means Mr. or Sir. जैसे हम यहाँ पे MR लिखते हैं मिस्टर के लिए, वहाँ पे ये लोग M लिखते हैं. So it's Monsieur Hamel if you actually want to know the French version, because the story is all about in France. So yes, till he reached the garden where the school was, he was out of breath. उसकी सांस फूल गई थी. Usually when school began, there was a great bustle. बहुत चहल पहल होती थी. वहाँ बच्चे चिल्ला रहे हैं, the teacher is saying something, कोई कुछ repeat कर रहा है. You know how the scenario of a school is. ठीक वैसे ही होता था. And it could be heard even, मतलब वो towards the end of the street also लोगों को सुनाई देता कि हाँ यहाँ पे स्कूल है, इतनी चहल पहल लगी हुई है. Closing of desks, lessons repeated in unison, very loud. Lessons repeated in unison meaning मतलब सब एक साथ वो lesson repeat करते थे. बहुत कई बार repeat करने से एक Yeah, you can read that, you can memorize it. And we used to literally sit with our hands over to understand better. Itna shor sharaba hota tha. And the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. But now it was different. It was so still. Sab shant tha. Pin drop silence. Why? I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk. मैं late हो चुका था. मुझे लगा कि oh my God, इस शोर शराबे में मैं चुपचाप अंदर निकल जाऊंगा क्लास में and I'll go and settle down. But oh my God, the luck was not ready to favor me. There was utmost silence. How do I enter? सबको पता चल जाएगा कि मैं स्कूल आ चुका हूँ. And then without being seen, I tried. But the problem was that day everything was as quiet as Sunday morning. Sunday morning? Holiday. Come on. Sunday there's nobody. So everything is so cool. But उस दिन तो Sunday नहीं था ना. Everything was so peaceful yet. How come and why and how and why today? Just because I'm late? And through the window I saw my classmates already in their places. सब मेरे दोस्त अपनी जगह पर बैठे हुए थे एकदम शांति से. And Mr. Amel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. I had to open the door. मेरे पास कोई choice था ही नहीं. I had no choice and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. मेरी जान निकली हुई थी कि oh my God, अब पता नहीं क्या होगा मेरे साथ. And just like I told you, bustle means to move in an energetic and busy manner. You should learn this vocabulary. It definitely makes your English sophisticated. And moving further, when he saw that he was really frightened when he entered, but nothing happened. You know what? Nothing happened. Monsieur Amel saw me. उसने मेरी तरफ देखा. And what? And he said very kindly. Oh my God, he said it very kindly. Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you. हम ये चैप्टर अब चालू करने ही वाले थे. Without you, no problem. बच्चा, go and sit down. Take your place. I jumped over the bench. मुझे कुछ पता नहीं चल रहा था कि ये हो क्या रहा है. So I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I got a little over my fright, I settled down. मतलब I came out of that trance कि he is going to shout at me, but nothing happened. You know what? Nothing happened to me. And I was settled. Now, as he settled down, he was out of the fright. And did he notice his sir? Oh my God, he was dressed differently. The attire, the dress was absolutely different. It was his beautiful green coat with his frilled shirt, a little black silk cap, all embroidered, which he never wore except on inspection and prize days. वो कभी ये कपड़े पहनता ही नहीं था. How come today? आज तो कुछ था ही नहीं, ना ही कोई prize day, ना ही कोई inspection day. So then why? ये पूरा माहौल कुछ अजीब ही लगा. बहुत सब sincere, with all sincerity everybody was sitting glued to their benches. The whole school seemed strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me the most was to see generally हमारे जो last benches होते थे क्लास के वो हमेशा खाली रहते थे. It was empty. कोई वहाँ बैठता ही नहीं था. But you know what? आज वो सारे benches full थे. Really? And why? कौन था वहाँ पे? So the village people were sitting quietly like ourselves. वो एकदम शांत चुपचाप बैठे थे. The village people, who were they? They were old Hausa with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others besides. सब वहाँ जो बुजुर्ग थे वहाँ के, they were there. Hey, strange. Why were they there? For what? Everybody looked sad, and Hausa had brought an old primer. What do you mean by primer? It's a textbook, an introductory textbook which is, brought for the children to read. And so he held it on his knees and his specs were lying across the pages. Now, while I was wondering about it all, Mr. Amel mounted his chair. He went and sat down, and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, जिस अंदाजे से उन्होंने मुझसे कहा था, ठीक उसी अंदाजे से he said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin, the capital of Germany, that all the schools should be taught German. The schools of Alsace and Lorraine, the districts in France. And the new master shall come tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. So I want you all to be attentive." This was the most shocking line. The most shocking line France had ever come across. What a thunderclap these words were to me. Oh my God, disastrous, terrifying. Ah, the wretches, those miserable people. That was what they had put up at the town hall. Ab mujhe ye baat samajh mein aayi. Now he started connecting the dots. The people who were standing in front of that bulletin board, which has been giving them bad news for the past 2 years. This was the terrible news that was mentioned on the bulletin board. My last French lesson. Why, I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. How is it possible? I have not even finished learning it. I have not got the command over the language. Oh my God, no more French for me? Is that the case? How sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs or going sliding on the Saar. Why did I do all this? Why did I miss school? And I went sliding on the Saar. Saar is a river in the Western Europe. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, they were a headache for me. They were a burden for me. And my grammar and my history of the old saints, suddenly they were like friends to me. Why? Because I was not going to get them any longer. I would have to give up. I didn't want to give up, just like Mr. Amel. And the idea that he was going to go away and I'm not going to see him ever again. Oh, seriously? And that made me forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. Oh my God, suddenly there was love and respect for Mr. Amel, whom I hated so badly. And now I realize today why is the class fully occupied, even the last benches. Now, it was in honor of Mr. Amel that all the villagers had gathered out there. It was because it was his last day in school, he was in his best clothes. Now I connect all the dots. And it was because they were sorry they also had not gone to school anymore. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. Do you understand this? They were giving all the respect just to give respect to the master for giving his service so faithfully, and the country, वो देश जो उनका अब रहा ही नहीं. While I was thinking of all this, suddenly मुझे अपना नाम सुनाई दिया. With all the thing going on in my mind कि आखिर ये हो क्या रहा है, suddenly I heard my name. And I realized it was my turn. Mr. Amel was asking me the rule of participles. Could there be some way, could there be something कि I should tell them this rule without a single mistake? I should go in one flow, in a loud, clear and bold tone. I wish I knew that rule so very well. But to my bad luck, I got mixed up on the first words and I stood there holding on to my desk, my heart beating and not daring to look up. I was dying of shame. I didn't know how to look up at my master to even tell that rule in one go. I heard Mr. Amel say to me, "Don't worry, little Franz, I will not scold you. आज मैं आपको नहीं डांटूंगा. But you know why? You must feel bad. You must feel bad because every day we keep postponing. We'll say we will learn our lessons tomorrow. Lekin, does tomorrow come? If tomorrow comes. And now you see where you've come out. That's the great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. And you know what? When these Prussian people, they question you, how come you are patriots? How come you are Frenchmen? You don't even know to speak and write French. How do you call yourself Frenchmen? And you are not the worst, poor little France. Now that you don't know your language, the Prussians will have all the right to tell you, how can you pretend to be Frenchmen? You neither know to write nor speak French. But you know what, France? You are not the only one. There are many more like you who don't know this language. This was the time Mr. Amel regretted and repented. It was even he was blaming himself as well as the parents. Why? The parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They wanted you to work. They wanted you to work at the farm and on the mills to earn some money. And me, what did I do? I used to ask you to go and water my flowers. And when I wanted to go fishing, I would just give you a holiday. That was the bad part of it. Then from one thing to another, he went on to talk about French language, saying it is the most beautiful language in the world, the most logical one. You know why? Because if they had been enslaved, if they were in the prison, then this was the language, their very own mother tongue, their language, which would help them communicate in the prison so that nobody could understand. So it was the most logical one. And then he went on to open a grammar book and he read us our lesson. You know the shocking part that happened? I understood every word that he spoke on that day. Now that was the most amazing part. Why? All he said seemed so very easy. It was sounding like, oh, it's just a piece of cake. So easy. And I had never listened so carefully. What do you think? He found the lesson easy or did he pay attention? Yes, he paid attention, so he understood and so he found it easy. Just like we always do. Mentally, we are never around. Physically, we are there. That's the reason we don't understand. And he had never explained everything with so much patience. That's what I felt at that point of time. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us everything he knew. All the knowledge that he had, he wanted to just transfer it to us on the same day and put it into our heads in one go. Everything he wanted to give us. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. Now there was lots for him to finish. He was trying to give us the maximum he could. That day Mr. Amel had new copies for us. And what was written on those copies? France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod on the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work. Us din everybody gave their 100%. Everybody with full concentration. They were right plunged into their books. Even if there was a beetle around, nobody bothered. Everyone was absorbed in their books. Nobody worried what was going to happen. On the roof, the pigeons cooed. मेरे मन में एक ख्याल आया कि क्या the German will also make them sing in German? Will that be the case? Well, that was just one thought. Whenever I looked up, I was writing, whenever I looked up and I saw Mr. Amel, he was looking at everything one by one. Everything he was trying to capture in his mind, that same place, the garden in front of the school, everything he was trying to capture, that beautiful place which he had served for 40 years. One thing at a time. And he had been there in the same place with the garden outside, the window and his class in front of him, just like that. Only the desks and the benches had been worn out. Of course, 40 years, come on, it tends to get spoiled. The walnut trees in the garden were taller. He had planted them himself, even the upvine trees. All these had grown onto the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart. He was heartbroken. His sister on top, she was packing the trunks. Why? Because they had to leave the country the very next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. He kept all the courage, he kept all the patience, he did not break down. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their languages, their lessons. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser, he had put on his spectacles and holding his primer. Remember, I told you that textbook which was for the children to read. He spelt the letters with them, with all the children who were reciting their lessons. Now you could see that he too was crying. Now it was the time when the heart started melting. Everyone's heart was in a bad shape. His voice trembled. Old Hauser, he was taking lessons with the children, but there was pain in his voice. His voice started trembling with emotion. It was so funny to hear him. I mean, we just felt like laughing. हमें बहुत हंसी आ रही थी उसकी आवाज़ सुन के. But then it was not the right time. It was not the right day. I remember the last lesson. All at once, now comes the main. Church clock struck 12, and the sound of the trumpets by the Prussians sounded under the window. Mr. Amel stood up in his chair. He was pale. उन्हें अब पता चला कि now is the time. Now is the time for me to stop. Now is the time for me to go. And now is the time for me to end. And so he tried to say something, but he was choked. He could not speak. He was totally full of emotions. If he would have spoken, he would have cried. So all that he did was he took a piece of chalk, and with all the pride in his heart, he turned towards the blackboard and he wrote, "Vive la France." Long live France. He was a patriot. He loved his country. And then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall. He did not get the courage to look at the children and ask them to leave. So all that he did was he leaned against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture. He made a gesture and he told them, "School is dismissed. You may go." Friends, that's the end of the story. It is such a beautiful lesson. What is your takeaway? What did you actually get from the lesson? That's most important. Remember, the country that you are living in, you definitely need to know the language. No matter what, you have to learn to speak and to write your national language. Thank you.